Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Animas Corporation, providing insulin delivery products for people living with diabetes and part of the One Touch family. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes with the world's first continuous glucose monitoring system that sends glucose readings directly to your compatible smart device. Live life on your own terms with Dexcom. Hi, it's Stacey. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, you've likely heard about the new Medtronic pump, the one they call a hybrid closed loop. The 670G is set to ship out to more people later this year, but there's a small group of people who've been using it since the first trial, about 2 years ago. Jason Gensler is one, and today he'll share his experience.
It's going to be a lot easier, in my opinion, for people that haven't used pumps before to jump on the 670 and get to success faster than the people that have been on the pumps for, 5, 10, 20 years. You have to forget a lot of the ways that you've been living with diabetes with your pump, because this thing takes so much of that burden off of your shoulders.
Jason will explain just what he means by that, and he'll talk about how he's been able to keep the pump after the initial trial was over. The FDA got involved. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of the podcast. If you're new, I am so glad that you have found us. But be aware, this episode is going to be a little bit different. In fact, for the first time, I'm sharing an interview that was actually conducted by somebody else, and I'll explain. But here at Diabetes Connections, we aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connections from thought leaders and authors and movers and shakers in our community, as well as the healthcare companies and the technology folks that we rely on. And I also like to talk to people who aren't trying to build their own artificial pancreas systems or working at NASA, but are just trying to live day by day with type 1 diabetes. My son was diagnosed 10 years ago, right before he turned 2, with type 1. I don't have type 1 diabetes myself, but I do have a pretty extensive broadcast background. I was a local radio and TV reporter for many years, and that's how the podcast came together. There are many different ways to listen to the show. I'm really glad you found it and you're listening however you're listening now. But we have some apps for Apple and for Android. You can listen through the website or Facebook or Twitter or still on any podcast app. So wherever you listen, please subscribe and then take a minute to review the show. It really helps other people in our community find it. There aren't a lot of resources for people with type 1 diabetes, and I'd really love to make sure that anybody typing in type 1 for a podcast or for an app can get to the show. They can find it, and you can help with that. So thank you very much. This week, we're going to hear all about the Medtronic MiniMed 670G insulin pump system from Jason Gensler, who's been using it for almost 2 years. Yeah, he was one of the very first to try it. He's been able to keep it after the clinical trial. The 670G is often referred to as the first commercially available hybrid closed loop system. It's also been referred to as an artificial pancreas. I don't really give it that label, but it certainly comes under the umbrella of artificial pancreas project because it's one step closer. And this is what all of the pump companies are working toward. And other systems that I can't really call a pump company yet, but there are almost a dozen of the hybrid closed loop systems that are being worked on. The Medtronic is the first, and that's why we are excited to see what it's all about and to hear more about it. So what does the 670G actually do? Well, there are two options. You can suspend before low, which stops insulin automatically 30 minutes before you reach a low limit that you select. It automatically restarts insulin when your levels go back to where you want them, and then it doesn't alert you when it does that. The website says, without bothersome alerts. So it just goes back to where it's supposed to be. The auto mode, which is a different mode for the pump, automatically adjusts your basal insulin delivery every 5 minutes based on your blood sugar levels to keep you in target range all day and night. It says this system includes a new CGM sensor. The sensor is called Guardian Sensor 3. It is the most accurate sensor from Medtronic, approved for 7 days, and it comes with their Contour Next Link meter, which is a remote that you can use for bolusing. If you're not familiar with artificial pancreas projects or the hybrid closed loops, I will link up a lot of information at diabetes-connections.com, and you can really go through and see the different interviews that we've done in the past and some other resources. But all of these systems that we have seen so far, that they have shared information with the public, have included some kind of insulin pump, and then a separate continuous glucose monitor. It's not an all-in-one. This is not one site on the body, but it is one system, one algorithm that controls the way the CGM and the pump communicate, and one step closer to being automatic. All right, I will let Jason explain the rest. And I want to let you know that this interview was conducted by Weston Nordren, who is the vice president of the Nightscout Foundation and community outreach for the foundation. If you're in the CGM in the Cloud group or familiar with Nightscout, Wes Ton is probably a familiar name, 2 words there, Wes as the first name. That's what he goes by on social media, and that's how I know him. Wes hosts an occasional video series called Are We There Yet in T1D Tech? And he recently interviewed Jason. I wanted to share the interview with you, first of all, because it's great. There's terrific information, and Jason is a really interesting person. And also because Wes shares a lot of his own family's story. He is a real behind-the-scenes player in our community, and I thought this would be a great chance for us to listen to him and get to know his passion a bit more. I'll link up to the Nightscout Foundation from this episode as well. It's important that you realize as you listen, I believe Jason mentions this a few times, but he is not paid by Medtronic. He doesn't work for them. He's not in their public relations department, as you might think after you hear the interview. I sent him some questions via email, which I think I'll put out as a blog post, or at the very least in the show notes, because I did ask him point blank about this sort of thing. And he said, no, he doesn't work for Medtronic. He takes no form of compensation from them. He did get the 670G system for free because he was in the pivotal trial. And then when he wrote, and you'll hear this, he wrote to the FDA requesting continued access. They've allowed him to keep the system right now without cost to him, but he does give them insight, feedback, and he shares his data so that Medtronic can see how it's working for him. So to be clear, and I think it's very important to be clear in this, Jason is not getting paid. Okay, here's Weston Nordren interviewing Jason Gensler about his experience with the Medtronic 670G. I'll be back at the end for some comments, and I'd love to hear from you about what you think. I did a little bit of editing just for some timing, really. You'll hear Jason speaking first here. He is talking about when he was diagnosed.
I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 16. It was just a couple weeks after I had turned 16. I guess you could say I got the typical treatment. So I went in, and basically how I remember my appointment when I was getting the diagnosis was essentially, okay, you have diabetes. Here's what you do. Count your carbs. So from now on, for 15 carbs, take 1 unit of insulin. Does that make sense? It's like, yeah, sure. All right. Do you want to go ahead and give yourself a shot? Not really, but I guess if I have to, I will. Okay, go for it. And then I did that, and then it was like, all right, so here's your pens, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. And I know it wasn't that dramatic or that drastic. It just felt that way because obviously there's so much to learn about diabetes, and there's so many things you have to have a grasp on if you're going to have really good control and live a successful life with type 1. But that's just how it felt. So that was tough. And I did pretty well up until college, right? That makes sense, because then you go to college and you have all these variables you've never ever deal with before. So then that was I guess you'd say, the 10-year period of throw myself a big, long pity party and be pissed at the world and feel sorry for myself because it just wasn't fair. And that caused me some issues. I would say it's probably about 10 years where I didn't take care of myself very well. And what that ended up leading to was I would wake up each day and not be able to feel my hands and my feet for an hour or two.
Wow.
That doesn't work very well when you work,
Right.
right? I would be showing up to work almost on a daily basis, not even being able to use my hands, and my feet basically felt numb. So I was tripping all over myself and my vision was terrible. But this was just about 5 years ago. And at the time I felt like I was already at the end, right? Like, oh man, here comes all these terrible things I never really wanted to have happen to me. And obviously it had a lot to do with how I was managing the diabetes, but I didn't know I could turn it around. I thought it was just going to be, okay, well, if I can't feel my hands and feet now and my vision's already bad, what's next? Am I going to lose, my kidneys and then my legs? And I just thought it was going to get worse and worse and worse. But luckily, I was able to become a patient at the Barbara Davis Center, which is, obviously a world-renowned clinic.
Correct.
And I was under the impression, honestly, that before I became a patient there, I thought that you either had to be super wealthy or that you had to be part of some clinical trials just to be seen there. So I never really investigated it, but a friend of mine who'd been going there since their doors had opened, he said, you got to go there, man. You're in really bad shape. So to make the really long, cool story short, I was blown away when I went there because so many people that work at the Barbara Davis Center have type 1 themselves. And I just remember every single person I met on the first day that I became a patient of theirs either had type 1 or had someone in the family, like a daughter or husband or sister, brother. So there was a really insane amount of credibility at that facility. And so basically what happened was I came back 3 times every 3 months, and my A1C in only 9 months went from about 12 down to 6, 7. That was amazing to me because obviously as every week kept going on, all of my symptoms got a heck of a lot better. And by the time I was seen for that third appointment, I just felt like everything had been relieved. And it was such a relief because I felt so bad for myself, but I also felt like I'd kind of caused myself some irreversible damage. And fortunately, since all the people I was meeting with at the Barbara Davis Center and even my endo who had type 1, they just took such a really unique approach because instead of trying to throw everything at me at that first appointment,
Right.
it decided that, hey, there's a lot you've got to learn. You're pretty ignorant when it comes to type 1. It's like, yeah, I guess I was. They decided to teach me one really critical component of diabetes management at a time that was going to have the most impact. And by the time I'd gone there for 3 90-day visits, I felt like I knew a heck of a lot more. But more importantly, my management was stellar at that point because there was so many things I had no idea were really occurring. I'd never used the CGM at that point.
Okay.
I actually had heard of them, but I'd never even tried one. But to understand postprandial elevated blood sugars made a massive difference. And
Right.
I can't even really remember what the first, second, and third thing was that they taught me, but I know for sure that ever since then, I've been in the 7% or lower range with my A1C. So that clinic and the people that they employ to work there is top notch. And I feel quite honestly like I owe my life to them, which is why I decided to start working there.
Oh, so you work at that location?
I did. It was interesting. So because I just felt like I kind of got my life back, I wanted to be around that atmosphere a lot more and the camaraderie, because there was over 30, 35 people that had type 1 just working in that 4-story building. And it was really cool to be around that, right? Because prior to that, when you go to work, you're lucky to work with even one other person with type 1. But if you are able to find a place where 30 or more people have type 1, you kind of feel a lot more like you're in the in crowd, I guess you could say. But there was just so much to learn. And what I liked the most about being around the clinic and the people was, of course, we do a ton of cutting edge research there. So to hear about all the different studies that were going on was really fascinating. And so I decided to start volunteering there. And that is kind of what catapulted the whole journey, because all I really wanted to do was be around those people. And within just a matter of a few months, I was there every single day volunteering all day because I couldn't think of a better thing to do with my time. And I think it was the 4th month or so that I was there basically as a full-time volunteer that they said, you should probably work here. I bet you'd really enjoy research. And so that was about 4 years ago. I did actually just end my employment at the end of March. So April 1st was my first day not being employed there any longer. The study was kind of running out of funds like most studies do.
Right.
But I've been working for a long time as well on social enterprise. It's really going to change diabetes treatment and change a lot of lives for the folks in our T1D community. So that's been another really fun thing that I've been working on since the very first day I started working there. And everyone that worked there knew about kind of my aspirations in this whole big vision. And then they were all super supportive as I started to move forward to pursue that full time. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Our vice president of development at the Nightscout Foundation lives in Denver, and she goes, Gail DeVore, and she goes to that facility. And
yep, I've heard of her.
Oh, you have? Yeah. Yeah, a really wonderful person from the very beginning of time that we met. She's just been a massive asset to the movement. For our family, our journey through type 1 diabetes began when our adult children had left for the university. They're now 26 and 30. And so instead of empty nesting, my wife and I spent about a year and a half deciding what we would do with the rest of our time because we were still in our mid-40s. Mm-hmm. So we decided to adopt special needs children. So we were able to get them from birth. We have twin 6-year-olds that are going to turn 7 in about 6 weeks. And then our son is 10 years old. And he came down with type 1 diabetes at 12 months old. So he had it very early on, and we've been dealing with it for 9 years. And so we've been able to manage his glucose levels. He has many issues due to the choices of the birth mothers. He has just a myriad of like 28 from partial chromosomes, damaged internal organs. It's pretty scary what he was born with. He was abandoned at the hospital. And so when he got type 1, that was just one more thing on top of all these things that this little guy was struggling with. Yeah. And so we are currently on a DIY closed loop system through the We Are Not Waiting community called Loop. And we were able to bring down his A1C from his worst A1C to his best A1C in 90 days, being closed loop 2/3 of the time during the week. So we saw this huge, powerful tool. The caveat here is I actually took a sabbatical for the first 30 days he was on it, and we just watched it. Not being a commercial system and only having one little guy. So we watched it around the clock. My wife and I took shifts, just making sure everything was in line. And we were amazed. But at school, he open loops. He's just on the regular Medtronic pump. And it's one of the best schools we've ever had for him, but they severely struggle managing his sugars because of the number of children there that need the nurse's attention. So he spends a lot of time in the 200 and 300s are crashing. Yeah. So we looked at that, and we can't close loop on a DIY system at school. So that's where the 670G comes into play for our family. So what's your journey to the 670G? What were the pumps you've used, and how did you get to this point?
So I began, let's see. Wow, I just dated myself. 17 years ago. 17 years ago, I started with Medtronic. They obviously went out of business. And then I was able to get on the Medtronic, the 500 series, I think into the 700 series. And then I ended up getting the 530. So my favorite thing about all the stuff I get to talk about is that everyone that knows me knows this story and the journey, and that's cool. I'm glad I can be open and upfront with people, but I was somewhat convinced to get on the 530G from the local rep, who's a wonderful friend of mine at this point. But at the time, her approach made so much sense, right? Because here's what was happening. I was turning in my paperwork for the T-Slim, the tandem insulin pump.
Right.
And was planning on wearing the T-Slim with the Dexcom, because after I became a patient at the Barbara Davis Center and did some studies on Dexcom, I don't even know what study I did. I've done like 14 at this point. But back then, whatever study I did, they allowed me to wear it blind for 3 months, and then they let us keep the device, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? I mean, that'll save you quite a bit of money. So at that point, when I all of a sudden was able to see what my blood sugars were really doing when it was no longer blinded, I learned a lot more about how to take better care of myself. So I knew for sure at that point I always wanted to be on CGM. But I was turning in my paperwork for T-Slim and was tapped on the shoulder by the Medtronic rep. And she just said, hey, what are you doing? And she knew what I was doing. She didn't believe it. But I went and sat with her because I had given the tandem rep plenty of my undivided attention for 2 hours or so, and was really impressed with the touch screen and the new technology, because this was right when it was coming out. And what basically she said was, we have our stuff in front of the FDA. We had it in front of them for years before we were finally approved. And I'm assuming all the other pump companies are probably projecting that their pairing with a CGM is going to happen pretty quickly, but I don't know how realistic that is. Ours took way longer than we anticipated, but here's the difference between our system and every other system. Ours is paired right now, and it'll work right now. So are you sure you want to go with a system that has the potential to never pair up, or may take 6 months or maybe 18? And as I thought about it, I went home and kind of wanted to sleep on it. And I realized, that makes a ton of sense. What if this T-Slim pairing with Dexcom does get held up? And maybe she's right. And so I retracted the paperwork and went with the 530.
What year was that?
That was 2000 and it was either 12 or 13. But even though I can't remember if it was 2012 or 13, what I do know is I was shipped one of the very first 530Gs. So whatever year that was, right. I know it was August of, I think, 2013, but it might have been 2012. No, it's 2013. It's 2013, so August 2013. But yeah, I'm sure just as well as everyone else in the diabetes community that did go ahead and move forward with that 530, that it was not what I expected.
Correct. Same for us.
Yeah. So, but there's a really interesting story to be told there, because now myself and that rep talk daily, right? We're like best friends, because that was in 2013. Well, I ended up getting, okay, so let me just go back to it really quick. I gave that pump an entire year, and I work at the BDC, right, at the time. So I was in front of the reps. I was in front of all the top docs, seeing all the studies going on, giving it the best effort I possibly could. And after a year, I finally just said, I can't do this anymore. This is not working for me. So I did go ahead and go with the T-Slim, got back on Dexcom, and was really happy because I knew how to use the Dexcom very effectively.
Right.
And I liked the T-Slim pump. It worked really well. So I wore those two devices. They weren't paired. I didn't have the T-Slim paired with the Dexcom because that hadn't come out yet, but right. It was fine and it worked well for me. So that's okay. But then I did a lot of studies with Medtronic, even though I felt like I just went through this period of time where I was pretty much furious with them. I thought that they intentionally put a lot of people on a device that they knew wasn't ready for the marketplace just because they were going to be because it was a money or a profit thing. But that was before I really understood Medtronic and knew of all the top people in the company. And and that kind of stuff. It was a pretty biased opinion without knowing too much background. But here's what's interesting. I ended up doing a lot of other studies, probably 10. And by the time I ended up testing the Nlight 2, which just got scrapped anyway because they realized how effective the Nlight 3 was going to be, I wasn't even supposed to be on the pivotal trial, the 670G trial. Our clinic had already filled up because it probably took them 5 minutes before they got their 12 people, right?
Exactly.
But somebody had to pull out last second. And since I had done some overnights with Medtronic, and I don't know if I'd done 3 or 4 studies on their behalf since I went back to Tandem, but I kind of talked to Dr. Garg and some of the other staff members and said, I think I would really want to try this because more than anything, I want to see what kind of progress has been made and see if this new device is anything close to what I was hoping the 530 would be. And so I was able to get on that trial. But it was not fun at first. It was really, really difficult because I know being first round in studies isn't usually the best thing unless you're in a unique position like I was where you can work at the clinic and then you've got all day, every day to kind of tweak things and mess around.
Right.
So I didn't really hate it, but man, a lot of folks think that maybe for the 123 people or so that were in the pivotal trial that we've all just, been living perfectly fine for the last 2 years and it's been all rainbows and butterflies. And that's not at all how it has unfolded, because what people don't quite understand is that we were given these pumps. The staff at the Barbara Davis Center was going to do their very best. Our clinical care team was going to obviously do the best they could with a brand new technology, and Medtronic was going to do the best they could. But there was a lot of missing pieces and information that maybe didn't quite make it from the engineer's mind when they developed the system to the clinical care team.
Very common.
Right?
Very common.
So exactly, but with a device that was such a game changer as this one really is, oh my gosh, it was crazy frustrating for all of us. And I'll just speak for myself, but since I got to know all the other people because we did the overnight hotel setting stuff, I know we were all struggling because we didn't even know what settings were going to have an impact in auto mode. And that's nobody is to blame for that. I wouldn't say it's anyone's fault. It was just really not a fun 6 months of having to figure it out while your life is on the line. So that's very
poignant.
Yeah. So yeah, especially though it can be incredibly difficult or frustrating when you're trying to live your life and run your other studies because you work there, and your blood sugars are crazy high every single day because the settings that we were adjusting were having no impact, but we didn't know that. So we had to basically test every single setting and try to figure out what was really working and what wasn't. And there was plenty of times we jumped on the phone with Medtronic, of course, and tried to talk with the engineers and said, well, why is this happening? And, they gave us their best answers, but it didn't always line up with reality. So to kind of wrap the story up, once we really figured out how to utilize the system in a way that we were kind of maximizing its capability and felt like we were really comfortable with how to have the best experience, that's when things started getting really fun, honestly, because I finally started to trust the device as if it had my back 24/7. Because prior to that, I thought this system's never going to fly, just like the 530 didn't work because they developed it wrong or whatever. But what's so cool is once you understand, this is really important for everyone too, because there's a lot of people that are about to get on this device. If you take this device and you open up the box, you can't expect to toss it on your belt and have it be a cure for diabetes. That's not what it is. And it was never intended to be that, right? So we have these really unrealistic expectations that I know were they were justified back when the 530 came out because we all saw what the media did, right? So it was called the first step towards artificial pancreas because it was somewhat JDRF and Aaron Kowalski's whole big circle of all the different steps to get to an AP. And as you know, the media conveniently left off the first half of
Yes.
Instead of first step toward, it all of a sudden was called artificial pancreas.
Right.
But there is a huge difference between the 530G and the 670G, and they weren't even planned, right? But that big difference is that the 530 got approved by the FDA, and everyone in the diabetes community got thrown on it, right? So we had no experience. And unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that everyone wanted it to. But the big difference with the 670G is because 123 of us or so across the country had such great experiences with it. I know our clinic was probably one of the first, or maybe it was the first, where we were we were seeing each other in the hallways or meeting after work, or I would just meet up with somebody who didn't work there who was part of the trial and say, "Are you going to give this back? Because I don't want to." So, you know, we talked about that a lot, though. I remember plenty of conversations where it was like, well, how are we going to tell Medtronic that we lost their pump? Are we just going to say, oh, someone stole it on the bus? I mean, how's that going to work?
That is awesome.
What's great, though, is that after I realized every one of us felt the same way, we just wrote a letter to the FDA, and it wasn't even a letter. Technically, it was just an email. And so Dr. Garg, gave us the right person to write the email to. And I didn't really expect much. I just thought, well, might as well give it a shot, and we'll write the FDA. And because if the FDA didn't like what I had to say or never replied back, I was still going to be considering how I was going to lose it on a bus. Yeah. But what was so cool was it wasn't even 2 days after I wrote this really long 2-page email to the FDA saying, this has been my journey with diabetes. This has been my experience with all this incredible technology. But this piece of technology is going to completely revolutionize and change our industry. And let me explain why. And basically, I could sum it up in one sentence. Once you understand how the pump works and that it's your responsibility to maximize its ability,
right,
you can think about diabetes probably, for me, this is how much I think about diabetes compared to before, probably between 20 and 25% compared to when I got on the pump, this 670, because now I know I can operate with my eyes closed. I know exactly how all the menu options work. I know all the background algorithms and exactly how they function. So the cool thing was that the FDA wrote back and said, oh, that's a great idea. This is exactly why we're trying to work with institution and industry to make this type of technology available to ease the burden of type 1 diabetes. And I didn't really know what that meant. I just thought, oh, how cool. The FDA responded to my email. That's fun. And I don't even think it was 2 weeks later when Dr. Garg and the staff, everyone came in and basically said, guess what? You get to stay on the pump. And at first I thought, well, okay, what are the contingencies though, right? So
what's the catch?
But what else do we have to do, other than what we've been doing for the study up until now? Because the study was only supposed to last 4 months, right? It was a huge thing for them to do a pivotal outpatient study where there wasn't a lot of interjection at all. It was literally just give people the pump and see what happens. And going from that 4th month until now, which now I've been on it for 22, 23 months, because I got on it the first week of June 2015, there has been so much learning. I ended up starting a Facebook group maybe 3-4 weeks ago because I knew Medtronic had 26,000 people waiting in the priority access phase. But I also knew there was a lot of things that I wish I was told when I first got on the pump that I'd like for everyone else to be told so that they don't have to suffer through that same learning curve, really. Because it makes no sense. Why would everyone go through the same learning curve if, a couple of us can say, hey, here's 5 or 6 things you need to be aware of. Here's how we can catalyze you straight to success. Let me explain exactly how the pump works. And I know I'm not a doctor. I don't work for Medtronic. I'm not a CDE. I'm not a certified pump trainer. But I know this pump like an expert. I mean, I know it probably better than anybody. And that's just due to the fact that I've been working with it daily for almost 2 years. So we set up a Facebook group. It is exclusively for people that are on the 670 right now. So as you know, the training phase is going on. And I have a lot of respect for Medtronic for putting that together, because they know they have a lot of work to do to gain back the trust from the marketplace since they launched 530. And in the last 2 years, if you ask me, there has been some really cool moves on their part. I think I'm not going to speak to who all works there these days compared to who worked there prior, but what I do know is they have sent so many people to our clinic to sit and just personally ask us, what could we do better? Is there anything that you think would make our launch any more successful? And that's not really something you would expect from our industry, at least in the last decade. So
definitely something you wouldn't expect from Medtronic.
Well, that's a better way to say it.
Because you and I are the demographic they're trying to get back.
Right.
We initially had awful experiences.
Exactly.
I mean, we were harpooning our 12-month-old with the Enlight 1,
Yep.
So the fact that you reconsidered that, the fact that our family's considering that and on the Pathway program, that's proof that Medtronic has done a lot of things right.
Yeah, and they really have. And that, there's so many things to speak about when it comes to that kind of a thing, because I'm assuming you totally get how often I get messages from people. And I mean, all day, every day, folks want to know, are you sure the sensor's accurate? And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I've been wearing it for 2 years. So what we did was put together, and by we, I mean myself and my social enterprise business partners, we put together a website. It's nothing special, but it will be special pretty soon here. But it's all about my experience with the 670, because I want people to see the stark contrast. There's such a big difference between life prior to the 670 and life with it. And so I made a little video with them to showcase that. And we also have a lot of FAQs on there. And the thing that we're working on having up in the next 2 days is my daily calibrations. So instead of calibrating twice a day, because you are required to calibrate at least once every 12 hours,
right.
I decided in the last 6 months that it's just so much easier to develop a habit or pattern to calibrate every 8 hours, basically. So what that ends up being is right when I wake up, like immediately after I wake up, I calibrate. And then I always try to calibrate about 3 hours after lunch, and then before I go to bed. And what that ends up doing for me is making sure that the pump is always in auto mode if I want it to be, right? It'll stay in auto mode without kicking me out because it's not asking for a calibration like while I'm sleeping.
Right.
So if all you have to do basically is test your blood sugar 3 times a day, and it happens to be when you wake up, when you go to bed, and after lunch, those are normal times to test your blood sugar anyway. Right? That's not difficult at all. But when all you're doing is pressing yes for calibrate, as opposed to just testing your blood sugar, it's actually pretty simple. But the what that does for you, I mean, it's unbelievable. So I'm at 109 right now. And I don't even think about diabetes because I'm always in range. So what we did on the website, because I wanted to be really transparent, not every single test is perfect. And it doesn't mean that I'm never above 200 or that I've never dropped below 70. But what they focused on, and they did such a great job of, is the amount of time that you are in range, right? So that variability is so well controlled. And between 70 and 180, actually, I just looked again this morning, I'm in range between 70 and 180, 86% of the time.
Very nice.
Awesome. Right. And I don't even really know where the other 14% goes because I feel like I'm always in range, especially when I'm awake. My overnight stuff is unreal because you can go to bed on this pump at 75 or at 280. And what's so cool about the way the auto mode works is you will wake up at 120 basically every time. I always wake up between 105 and 135.
Nice.
So, and if you can imagine what that's like for someone, right? You'll see it really soon when you have it on your son. It's unreal to be able to wake up every single day with a perfect blood sugar. It's awesome to be able to start your day without having to start chasing, right? So if you're high, you got to start chasing with insulin. If you're low, you got to treat. It's so cool every day to wake up, and it's become an expectation for me because I've gotten so used to it, and that's gonna shift our whole industry because I could totally see in the next year and a half people using this system, 35,000 or so, I'm sure will end up on this pump. And no longer will people be okay with other devices if they're waking up outside of that sweet spot, because this one does it without any work whatsoever from the user. And that's a game changer.
One of the things that you mentioned in regards to the benefits of when you go to sleep at any number, you wake up, within range, that is the very same thing that we have experienced on our loop system, which uses a Medtronic 722 pump. Mm-hmm. But there's only about 300 of us, and we're on the very bleeding cutting edge of technology and doing these things by ourselves. But there's tens and hundreds of thousands of people that need the commercial system, that need to be able to have a large company behind it for support, that need this type of respite. We can't expect the entire T1D community to be doing a do-it-yourself solution, because that's a complete fail of the industry if that happens. Yeah. And I did a short little video on where everybody was with their artificial pancreases, and I basically said the same thing you did. Gone are the days of the dumb pumps. Yeah. Love it or hate it, the 670 for at least 18 to 24 months is going to be the smartest pump on the market. I'm glad to see them working on the 690 so that they can compete with Beta Bionics and Bigfoot Biomedical and eventually Horizon from Insulet. But the only sad part here is the tandem scenario, because the people doing the software are part of our community, and Tandem needs to not lose 90% of their market value in 12 months. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But the 670G, I appreciate what you're saying in regards to that, because we don't want to have to bounce from our closed loop system to the 670G for school. We want to be able to have a solution in the 670G that we can do 24 hours. Now, the system we use is a basic system, and it sounds like it's very comparable to the system in the 670G. The obstacles you indicated you ran into initially, those are very typical for a DIY system, because in a DIY system, you have to bring all of your correct diabetes numbers, IC, insulin to carb ratio, your ISF, your DIA. You have to have all of that information real, because when you close the loop, the algorithm's going to do the math. And a lot of people, I would say probably 80 to 85% of the communities don't have the correct information in their pumps. They may be adjusting ISF to compensate for basal, or adjusting basal to compensate for ISF, where you can get away with that if you're doing 9 boluses a day, 6 boluses a day. But when you close the loop and something's making a decision every 5 minutes, the math has to work out. You have to have the right information. So your initial scenario with that, in our community, we talk about the 3 waves. There's the engineer wave, where they develop these technologies. And then there's their documentation, which makes perfect sense to an engineer. And then the next wave comes in, and people are looking at it and going, how can we help and make this easier? Then there's the personalization for another segment of the community, where they create the user manuals, they create the documentation, and then more people are able to get on. And then the third wave is actually people will do videos, except technology moves so fast in the community that it's usually outdated. There's not as great value in that.
Yeah.
But so that gives me a lot of hope in regards to the 670 just being able to be the system, because we don't want to have to jump back and forth.
Right. Well, it'll be really easy because the 670 will allow you to send your son off to school. He will probably have much tighter control than he has now. Not will probably, I know for sure. I mean, unless he's sneaking things and snacks like every 45 minutes, he definitely will.
Yeah, we're pretty confident that'll improve.
Yeah, and I've never used the Nightscout technology, or We're Not Waiting. Obviously, ended up running into tons of patients at the Barbara Davis Center because we had 6,000 patients, and plenty of them really enjoy what you guys have done and all of that type of stuff. But I'm more of from the community of, first of all, I guess you could say I feel kind of old when it comes to trying to do things myself. So I didn't really trust being able to set it up and carry things around and do a good job. So I felt like, the industry will just do it really soon. Now here we are, I don't know. How many years have you guys been around? It feels to me like 3 or 4 at least, where I figured by now they'd already be done. And now I see inside and I know what's actually happening. So let's say, whether it comes from Nightscout or it comes from Medtronic, it needs to happen tomorrow.
Right. Basically, John Kostick, the co-creator of Nightscout, in April of 2013, went to buy a monitoring solution from the industry. And they were like, well, it doesn't exist. Now, unbeknownst to us, it did exist, but they couldn't figure out how to capitalize on it, how to have it be a profit center. So they just shelved it. So then you have the community, because in a open source community, you need to have a good idea and you need people to follow through with it. Well, the community that began with 5 families is now over 40,000 families worldwide in 33 different countries. There's plenty of people to push it along.
Yep.
And so that was something that has always been a wonderful thing. However, in corporate America, you not only have to have a good idea, have the resources to put it through, but you got to make profit on it, because it's not a not-for-profit.
Exactly. If it's not monetized, it isn't going to work.
So our other co-creator was actually the head of the AP development at Medtronic, Lane Desborough.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so they got together. Lane had the monitoring system. John had putting it in the cloud for the parents to be able to remotely monitor. And then from there, it's history. Jason Calabrese, Ben West. Ben West is now at Dexcom. The industry, by the way, hires away all the developers. But we keep getting more T1D diagnoses, and we keep having more medical professionals, software engineers, hardware engineers, people in the medical field, people out of the medical field, because T1D doesn't discriminate. It takes anyone.
Yeah.
So perpetually, some of the most innovative things that have come into our community have actually come from the former East Bloc, because they've done so much with so little for so long that they're the ones that took the contour link, the USB cable, and put it into the back of a Sony Xperia phone. So they just carry around their cell phone and the 640. And so that's the kind of innovation that, if something's if something's broke, they don't send it to Medtronic, they fix it.
Yeah.
You know, so this has been a great help for our community, because the irony for our family is the 722 pump our son started on at 12 months old, that was a fiasco. We only lasted 90 days and then jumped to Dexcom and Omnipod. But that was more to do with the fact when our little guy could hold the pump in his hands, his thumbs fell on the unlock sequence. We caught him in a bolus. So we had to put it in a zip bag, fanny pack, and lock it away. And then he'd spend 8 hours breaching the zipper. So we just basically, it's like, we need to keep this child alive. He's curious beyond measure. And so we need to put him on something he can't dose himself with. So that's where the Omnipod came into our life. But fast forward to last November, the 722 is the very pump we were able to turn into the closed loop system. So Medtronic for us has been a love-hate relationship. But the fact that they're doing a lot of things right is proof that you wanted to keep that pump, is proof that our family is actually on the pathway. Because I've been very outspoken against the sensor accuracy, but someone came up to me at a conference and said, you talk a lot about your disappointment in the sensor accuracy, but you're comparing the original version to the current version. You're not going to compare the original iPhone to the current iPhone. She basically said technology has advanced.
Yes.
So when we started looking into it, and we were looking at the MARD values being very similar between the G5 and the revision 2 of the N-Lite 2. Now, are you on the Guardian 3 on the actual third generation?
Yeah, you have to be on the 670. That's the only sensor that'll work. And when you start to understand that the things you heard for the last 3 or 4 years about any CGM are very applicable to this as well, which is, don't be trying to test and calibrate 20 minutes after you just ate. Right? You know what I'm saying? So
no, your best practices are what we learned to do in the community, because even though the Dexcom G4, which had like a 13 MARD compared to the 9 on the N-Lite 2, we were able to get at least a doable trend that we couldn't get on the Medtronic. But we were never able to keep it in line. And one of the first things in early 2014 when we joined the community is there were a lot of medical professionals and a lot of people with a lot of experience. And they said, no, you've got to make sure you're calibrating. These are your best practices now. And so we started doing that. And within a week, our numbers were spot on. Yep. So we developed our own best practices for our son's physiology. And when I read what you recommended doing, I looked at my wife and I said, this is the same thing we're doing with Dexcom. Yep. Because even in our group, you'll have new users come on and say, I'm 100 off or I'm 150 off. He goes, how can I even trust this? And it's like, in the old days, I would say, it's just a trend line. You can't trust the number, but we're looping on a number.
Yes.
You have to be able to trust that. So I said to my wife, we don't have to do anything different. And the fact that you do the 3 calibrations alleviates the concern our endocrinologist had in regards to it going out of auto mode for a teenager who may not pay attention at school or a small child that may not know what to do.
Right.
But
that's a valid concern. Obviously. But the other thing I'm starting to teach our group in the Facebook group, basically starting this week, I'm asking them each, there's 40 members in there now, which is awesome actually. And it kind of runs itself, which is great. But once a week, I'm going to be polling them and asking, what is just great questions so that just in case you're curious why I even created the group, it's basically because I didn't want the rest of our type 1 community to have to endure the same, upset and frustration and all that stuff that us as the pivotal trial participants had to endure. But if we ask them, these really pointed questions and figure out, well, what's the one thing that you wish you were told at your training or this or that? basically we can close all the gaps on the Medtronic training protocol because trust me, Medtronic is going slow for a reason, and they're doing their very best trying multiple different variations of trainings to figure out what's going to work best, but there's still inevitably going to be gaps and holes.
Sure.
But if we figure out what all those gaps and holes are, because we have people from all over the country that are all part of the training phase, then we can figure out exactly what they need to say and what things they need to not say to allow each of these people to get to success as fast as possible. And they're more than willing to make everyone that's being trained aware of the Facebook group. So of course, Medtronic can't sit there and say, oh, we're behind that.
Correct.
But at the time, guess what? It's 2017 and technology works in wonderful ways where I put one really important thing on Facebook and all 40 people know in a matter of 10 seconds. So I know they're really supportive of it, but it'll be great for our whole community because we're going to develop some paperwork, some documents that Medtronic will then take back to headquarters and figure out how can we implement this into our training and make sure that the information is disseminated to the new user in a way that is digestible, but really makes sense from the beginning, because it's very different, Wes. It's like handing a 16-year-old a Ferrari. But seriously, it really is. That's my best analogy, because it's so different from every other pump that you've ever used that I've said this for a year now. It's going to be a lot easier, in my opinion, for people that haven't used pumps before to jump on the 670 and get to success faster than the people that have been on the pumps for, 5, 10, 20 years. Because you have to forget a lot of the ways that you've been living with diabetes with your pump, because this thing takes so much of that burden off of your shoulders. And like you said, once somebody realizes what they've got to do to have the best experience with the pump, which some of the easiest things are learning when to calibrate and what the best practices are. Once they're comfortable and they understand the best practices, they literally can totally relinquish control to the device and feel 100% trust that it's going to have their back no matter what, because it does. I've never, since I've been in auto mode and really understood how the pump works, gone so low that I've needed assistance or anything like that. In fact, a better real statistic is, to this day, almost 2 years later, 123 people, not one single severe hypo and not one single DKA.
Nice.
So the pump is really effective, but the more we can teach our type 1 community at the very beginning how to go from, hey, you just got your pump in the mail and you got the box, to you're incredibly successful with it as fast as possible. I bet you we could get to the point where within 3 months, everyone feels like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm on this. This is a life changer. But people also have to realize something. I hear all the time people saying these types of things. Oh, well, why did they leave out the Bluetooth aspect? Why isn't there already a way for the families to monitor the blood sugars? Why did Medtronic miss the boat on this and that and the other? And there's such easy explanation for that. Do you think Medtronic really expected the pump to get approved by the FDA in 106 days?
No. In fact, the FDA told us in a conference last October that they expedited the process to market 3 full years.
Exactly. And that, I believe that statistic 100%, because I knew how long that Medtronic could have their 630 in review with the FDA. And it wasn't even 2 months after 630 got approved that Medtronic was made aware, well, the whole world was made aware that, okay, we're ready for 670 and it's approved. Go for it. That's amazing. Right? Because as a clinic, we were under the impression when we first started the trial that we were going to have phase 1 and it was going to be the guinea pigs and we were going to learn a lot and probably allow phase 2 and probably phase 3 to go pretty smoothly, but it would be a standard clinical trial of at least 2 phases, possibly 3. And the thing that everyone else that doesn't work in clinical research seems to forget is that this is the very first device ever that's been approved by the FDA that's delivering a hormone that can easily kill people.
Right.
Right. So,
auto dosing.
Yeah, exactly. So when everyone says, oh, well, 120 is too high and all this stuff, really, I kind of am trying to figure out the most eloquent way of responding to those folks by basically saying, if you ask me, you got two choices. You can be frustrated, upset, furious, and pissed at the world and expect to be handed a cure for diabetes tomorrow, or you could be realistic and you could be really grateful for what has happened in our industry in the last couple of years, where institutions and industry and FDA all of a sudden have found this common ground where, oh my gosh, if we all work together, we can get to success a heck of a lot faster and everyone can benefit all at the same time. And of course, who gets the most benefit from that? The type 1 community. If you really think about what things were like just a matter of a couple of years ago or a decade or a couple decades ago, when you had
Absolutely.
We've come a long, long way. So I think it's kind of up to the type 1 diabetic themselves or their family to realize, you can be super frustrated and run around being upset at the industry or the pump company because there's not already a cure. But for the folks that say, oh, there's a cure and we're just not releasing it, you're so far from the truth. Everyone that's in type 1 diabetes research, a majority of them have type 1 or they know someone with type 1 and they love and care about those people. Nobody has a cure that they're not releasing because they want to make money off of our disease. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, well, the first thing, one of the things a lot of people don't realize is that in the history of mankind, there has never been an autoimmune disease cured.
Absolutely.
So if type 1 diabetes was cured, the big lead in that story would not be type 1 diabetes was cured. It would be we have cured an autoimmune disease for the first time in the history of man.
Yep.
So that's one of the things that makes us focus on what kind of tech can we get, because there may or may not be that cure coming. Hope springs eternal. I want it always to take place. But the changes that have taken place in the last 3 years with the FDA, Courtney and the different people there, that is massive. Now, perhaps other departments in the FDA are still in 1968, but not that department. The medical device department is on the front lines, and I really have to hand it to them for everything that they've done. And basically, the approval of the 670 is a crowning achievement in that the FDA saying, we're not waiting. Let's get this to the patients. And just yesterday, I was talking to someone and had to tell them when they said, it was another AP system that their set point was 140. And I said to them, this isn't the end of the line. This is the very first step. Okay, yep. This is going to improve as we go along, but this is the very first step. So you have to look at this as the groundbreaking thing it is. And although people can get lower A1Cs on the cutting bleeding edge do-it-yourself stuff, you have to have compassion. You have to have empathy for the hundreds of thousands that would not be a proper solution for.
Absolutely.
You have to have a commercial system. And in fact, one of the, there's a doctor / researcher / security specialist in software in Europe. And one of the things he said to us is the biggest benefit in everything that's happening is not in the do-it-yourself community's products, but it's in putting the industry on notice. If a bunch of families can do this, you should be able to do this. You're the 800-pound gorilla with billions of dollars. You can do this.
Yeah.
And he says, so an FDA-approved pump that's new, that's groundbreaking for industry, that is the value of all the effort and energy that's put into this. And I will have to say the co-inventors of the open APS system, Dana Lewis and Scott LeBrand, they are actually the ones that took me aside and said, you need to realize that Medtronic is going to help tens of thousands of people. This is going to be a good thing. We don't have to be worried about this coming into fruition. You have to realize that this is what is needed. And so with the other lady telling me, quit comparing the Enlight 1 to the Guardian 3, those are things where I actually had to stop. I had to rethink my thought process and realize, you know what? Bingo. It's not about just our family. It's about the worldwide community.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have anything close to what my life looks like right now, right? With the latest and greatest technology, all the education I could possibly wish to have at my disposal, and the resources. And man, those people's lives are going to change for the better so drastically. And I'm excited for that type of a movement, and it's happening right now. And the thing that I was mentioning earlier, I don't even think I finished my sentence, but on the website, I'm going to have a page that basically shows you can almost go on a calendar and pick whatever day starting in April that you want. And each day, all of my calibrations show up, so people can see, it's not a perfect system. Your calibrations aren't within 1 point every time, but mine are on average between, usually 10 and 15 points every single time. And it's just because I learned how to use this system really effectively. But I think that'll give people a lot of confidence, honestly, seeing that every day, all I'm actually doing is testing 3 times and pressing yes, calibrate. And you see that the system is very effective because the sensors are very, very effective. But more than that, the algorithm and my understanding of the system allows me to be in range all the time. And I feel awesome. And my productivity has gone through the roof. I've had so many people mentioning that, oh my gosh, what's happening in the last 6 months? And it's weird when somebody else who doesn't have diabetes, who you don't work with closely, says something like, right, you haven't seen them in a year, and they make a comment like, wow, you've just been 10 times more productive than I remembered you last time we got together or had a meeting, and all the stuff that you've been able to accomplish. And that's when it really starts to set in that, holy cow, this is changing everything for our industry. And for people to be able to experience that, when you realize, because I had an aha moment one day, and I'll tell you about it quickly. I was at work. We had a really intricate day, I guess you could say. We had to do a kidney function test on one of our patients, and that's like a 6-hour visit where you're constantly checking their blood sugar, and you infuse them with a drug called iohexol. You just have to be on your toes for every aspect of that visit because it's done in our infusion center. And to make the really long story short of that aha moment, I missed breakfast. We had another couple of patients show up. One of them was really early, and then the other one showed up on a day that he wasn't even supposed to be there. So it was a very difficult day, clinically speaking and research-wise, but I didn't get breakfast, and then my lunch didn't even happen until about 4:30 in the afternoon, and finally that patient had left, and everything was all wrapped up. And I looked down at my pump, and my blood sugar was like, I don't even remember. It was between 80 and 120. But then I looked at the graph and I realized, holy crap, I missed meals. I've been stressed all day long. My blood sugar was 123 average. And that's when I went into the pump and looked, wait, what was my average today? And that's when I got kind of emotional, honestly, because I realized in that moment, whoa, I had no time whatsoever today to even look at the pump, to even see where I was, because I was so busy. And yet it kept me in range the entire time, and I didn't have to think about it a single time. That's crazy. That's changing my life. And so obviously that happened back in either August or September. I think it was September. And ever since then, I've gotten even better at using the pump. But I'm just excited for all the other people who have just heard really good things. And I want them to be realistic, right? It's not a cure in a box. But if you use the technology, like the Facebook group that we have, the second somebody gets the pump shipped to their door, they can join our group, and they'll be expedited from right when you got the pump to success very, very quickly. And I know for a fact that this pump will change the game for everybody, but people also have to remember Bigfoot, right? I'm excited beyond belief for Bigfoot. I'm really excited for Damiano's system, right? All of these things are really encouraging. However, there's something that everyone forgets, that, they've got these great big promises too, and I'm sure their systems are going to be amazing, but they still have yet to put those systems on a ton of people and work out the kinks. So for everyone that's going to wait on getting the 670 because, I'm just going to wait for the next one in line that's going to be 100 times better. Obviously, everyone can make their own choices, but each one of those pump companies are going to have their own period of time, like Medtronic had to.
Sure.
Where, because Medtronic is a couple years ahead of everyone else behind them. So, and then the best part for me to go ahead and shoot our little horn here is that we've had over 120 people on the system for almost 2 years, and now there's going to be another, I don't know if it's 500 or 750 during the training phase, but this device actually does work. It does. You don't have to wait it out and see if it works. We already know for a fact it works. So if people want to wait, that's totally cool, but I'm going to continue to put my daily calibration stuff up on the website. We're going to try to make sure that everybody in the type 1 community understands that there is a huge shift that's coming, and you can be a part of it, or you can sit on the sidelines and watch. But I am one of those kind of people that wants the best now. And I'm more than happy to say very confidently that this is by far the best system anybody could be wearing. And I'm excited for you guys to experience it with your son, because you'll see even with youngsters that it removes so much of the burden that you'll probably have some emotional moments with your wife.
One of the things that everyone has to remember is all of the release dates are marketing release dates.
That's right.
What we have to remember is a product ships with the engineering release date.
Yep.
So, and I don't necessarily want any of the people that we love at Bigfoot or at Beta Bionics to release sooner than they're supposed to. Bring it to market when it's mature so that you don't have a misstep in the process. So we look at it like we said in the 600 series episode, we look at it like Pokemon. We're going to collect them all. We've been on almost every pump over the last 9 years. So looking for the best solution. One of the things that I am greatly heartened by is the fact that in our conversation today, I'm pretty confident we won't have to switch back between our two closed loops. That we'll be able to use the 670 and have that until we have to come to the decision: do we do the 690? Do we do Bigfoot? Do we do Beta Bionics or whatnot? Because the second generation of all of these pumps are going to have even more impressive algorithms. You have Bigfoot, and they have a proven pump. It's the Asante Snap.
Yep.
So, and their algorithm is going to be the new thing. And then you have Beta Bionics, which has a very mature algorithm, enter your weight, and then they have a brand new pump. So it's the pump side that they have to do the focus on. So there is more time needed. And I look at it as, the old phrase, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It's like for our son, and it actually fits the definition that Lane Desborough and Howard Look from Tidepool came up with in November 2013. If you know how to do it, if you have the tech to do it, and you know how to improve your child's life, you need to do that.
Yeah.
That was the "we are not waiting" clarion call. So the irony here is that "we are not waiting" clarion call was the definition of why we chose the 670. Because we're not going to wait 2 years to improve our son's life. He needs to be learning at school in range.
Yeah. And that's exactly, wow, you brought up such a great point. He will be at school with optimal blood sugars the entire time he's there. Imagine how much more of the information that he is supposed to be taking in will be sinking in after he's on that 670. It's going to be mind-boggling, trust me, because, I mean, here I am, 33 years old, and it's really moving for me. So it'll be fun to hear all the stories from folks like yourself with your son and just everyone in our community as they get to witness firsthand their children or their loved one starting to shed that skin of all of that burden, because after they get really comfortable, I don't know how long it's going to take each person, but what I do know is once they get to that point where they realize I 100% trust this device, it's crazy how much more stuff you can do in life when you're not constantly, overwhelmed by that T1D burden. I know we have a brochure at the Barbara Davis Center. Actually, there's no point in me pulling it out right now, even though I know it's directly behind me, but it was basically a brochure to show how much of the artificial pancreas technology we were testing there, and that it's just going to be a great solution no matter which technology company people choose. But the big stat is that, did you know that somebody with a type 1 diabetes, whether it's conscious or subconscious, makes over 350 decisions related to T1D every single day?
Right.
That is crazy. But at the same time, when you start to really think about it, it's like, wow, our lives really do totally revolve around this condition. And when you get on this pump, that number goes to something tiny, like maybe you only think about it 15 to 25 times a day instead of 350. So imagine how much more of that mental capacity that you were unintentionally allocating towards type 1 that you all of a sudden are allowed to start focusing on things that really do matter and things that light you up every day. And it's incredible.
We actually have, just in closing, we actually have a proof of concept for what you just said. The season opener for our tech show, Are We There Yet? In T1D Tech, was the world's first race car driver with a closed loop. And so he went from 22nd place to first in his class. He smashed the course record in the time, and he finished in competition all overall with all the drivers. He was first in class and then number 5. And so what can you do with all of this extra ability? Because he wasn't out there worrying about his blood sugars or being in the 200s because he had to carb up before he goes out racing. He was able to have that. And we actually, in the episode, we have a screenshot of his blood glucose and how it's moving. When the adrenaline hits, it starts to go up, and then how the basals adjust and keep him in like 165 range for this race, where he would be between 200 and 300 in a normal race. And he was very surprised at quality of life improvement was instantaneous. And so what you're saying is real. That is absolutely real. And I asked our community, what will you be able to do with this newfound focus, energy, respite for the caregivers? And that's the other side of the coin. If you think the set points of 120 or 140 are too high, don't forget there's the other side of quality of life improvement. If you're spending 2 to 3 hours a day on diabetes, this is going to be of benefit to you.
It absolutely will. And one of the things I'm going to be doing with that Facebook group, with my website, just with our whole community over the next 6 months or so, is figuring out a way to get people's answers to that. And, folks aren't going to figure that out overnight. It's taken me, almost 2 years to finally really allow that all to sink in. But that is going to be so cool for all of us to see how much change we're able to have for the better with our lives. Because for me, it's this one word that makes all the difference in the world, and it's freedom. It really is. You all of a sudden recognize you're free from that cage that your brain has been in for the last, for me, it's been 17 years. And now all of a sudden, everything that I'm up to is top notch. And of course, the social enterprise and the things that we're moving forward with for a whole entire new model for the nonprofit industry, which I'll share with you offline. But it's kind of astounding how cool that all is, that I've been working on it for 3 to 4 years, but all of the momentum has really kind of picked up in the last 6 to 9 months. And it's just driven it straight to the top because I'm able to focus on it with all of my attention and what I should have been able to do before. But with that freedom comes so many cool things and a lot of great realizations. But it's going to be fun to start tracking, like in our type 1 community, there's a lot of people in the community that can benefit from this thing, like 1.4 million people basically. So we'll see what happens, but it'll be really exciting. And then to watch it progress. Yes, most of us that are on the 670 that were in the pivotal trial are probably going to go ahead and test the 690 from Medtronic as well, because we're excited about it. But I already know about a lot of the things that they're already implementing into it. And I just can't wait for that to happen. Do I want to test Bigfoot and Beta and all that? Yeah, of course I do. How am I going to do them all at the same time? I don't know. But I'll figure something.
Well, Jason, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I love seeing the same energy that gave birth to our community embodied in what you are doing, because you don't have to start with very many families to have good efforts in support, help, love, really explode, because the need is huge, the need is massive, the need is overwhelming, and for these support systems to exist. Now, your Facebook group is, once you've received your package, you can join the group.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. When we receive our 670, we'll join that group. But we'll link to your website so everyone can follow the blood glucose calibration, so everybody can overcome the distrust of the sensor accuracy. So everyone that knows their best calibration practices knows that those have to continue.
Yes, and that'll be on the website. The other last aspect of the site that is pretty cool, I will be holding a weekly Zoom session for up to 50 people, for folks that just want to chat with somebody that's been on it. They want to ask a few questions. I know a lot of people understand that's a big decision to make. Usually it's a $8,000 decision up front, and another probably $15,000 over the next 4 years. But it's a 4-year decision, so I want people to be really comfortable with that decision that they're making. So they can just sign up for the Zoom chat that's going to happen once a week, and then if those start filling up, I'll be willing to do a couple a week, whatever it'll take, so that our Type 1 community can really experience the best possible technology and system that exists right now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, on behalf of the Nightscout Foundation, we thank you for your time and, again, for your efforts and energy.
Well, thank you very much, Wes. I really, really appreciate it. I'm so glad I was able to speak with you and Nightscout.
This has been a Nightscout Foundation production. Come change the world with us. Learn more at nightscoutfoundation.org. And in association with CGM in the Cloud. Open source, open data, open hearts. Caring for you and your loved ones around the world and around the clock. We now return you to your regularly scheduled life, already in progress.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
So how about that? What? It really is wild to think about not just this device, but what else is coming. Man. So my first thoughts on the Medtronic, it was interesting to hear Jason talk about checking 3 times a day, which is, I understand. I mean, it's no big deal. That is a great amount to check if you're looking for, automated and his blood sugar in range. I know a lot of people with Dexcom just calibrate twice a day. And I wonder if that would throw anybody off. I don't know. But no adjustments for highs or lows? I mean, really, it is so hard to imagine, especially in the last 2 years as I wouldn't say easily managed son, because there's nothing easy about diabetes for anybody. And ages 2 through 9, as I look back, were not easy. But I felt like we did a little less work to get better results. And since 10, 11, and now 12, it's getting harder. The hormone changes are insane. And I feel like we're doing a lot more work and not getting the best results. So as I hear about systems like this, it's like, gimme. I want. I'm thrilled that Wes from the Nightscout Foundation allowed us to share this interview. It is available on video as well, and I'll link that up if you'd like to see it. And more information, of course, about Nightscout. And to Jason, I will link up all of his information. He mentions websites and Facebook groups, so you'll be able to find much more about him and learn more about Medtronic. Now, as of this airing, we do not have a ship date. There have been some changes in terms of when most people who signed up for the 670 are going to get it. So what I have heard is possibly later this summer. But of course, we will let you know. And I've reached out to Medtronic. We're going to talk to them when it does start shipping and get some more information about the system. But what do you think? Let me know. You can contact me, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, always on social media, all over the place, Facebook, Twitter. And if you've got the app, you can actually reach out straight through the app. On the upper left-hand side, those 3 lines that you always see to click for more information. You can click on that and you can share the show on Twitter or Facebook. You can send a message. You can email me. You can share the show via text, which I love. If you click on message inside the app, you can text the show to anybody you want. It's pretty cool stuff. So go ahead. There's also an alarm if you want to wake up or go to sleep listening to me. Oy vey. But that's there. You can get that too. But the app's pretty cool. So fool around with it. Let me know what you think. And let me know what you think of Medtronic and of Jason's interview. I'm really hoping that in a couple of years, we're going to be talking about all of the different companies having so many different choices that this will just be a regular thing. And we may not be as wowed as I am right now. Man, wouldn't that be great? A reminder that I am partnering with the great folks at Beyond Type 1 this summer as they kick off Bike Beyond on June 3rd, an epic 10-week adventure, a cross-country bike trip from New York City to San Francisco. And we are going to be following along every step of the way. I'm so excited to partner with Beyond Type 1 about this. We'll be kicking it off here on the podcast shortly after they begin on June 3rd with interviews and then reports from the road throughout the summer. So please stay tuned for more on that. It's going to be a pretty wild ride. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a different kind of episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I am happy to share the microphone anytime I think it's going to be great for the show. I know that I'm interested in hearing other voices, and if you are too, let me know. Happy to share whatever information that I can. That's what I'm here for. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.